Hello everyone, I'm Ross Brown from the Southwest Cyber Resilience Centre. I'd like to welcome you all to the latest in a series of our cyber and serial webinars. This morning we're really lucky to be joined again by Andrew Baldrian. Andrew, you're very, very welcome and thanks for giving us your time this morning. Andrew's going to tell us all we need to know about virtual private networks, which is a fascinating subject, and I know I'm going to learn a lot this morning as well. For those of us, those of you in the audience who haven't already joined us as members, you can do so free and it's easy. Just go to our website, www.swcrc.co.uk, and complete the application. It's really that simple. You'll then benefit from our customer journey, monthly newsletter, podcasts and webinars such as this. As we go through Andrew's presentation, please feel free to ask any questions in the chat, and I can pick them up and then ask them for you from there. But hopefully there'll be an opportunity to ask some questions live on air when Andrew finishes his talk. So just a little bit about Andrew, and I hope it doesn't make you blush too much, Andrew. Andrew is an experienced at a senior management level of working with both large American software companies and small VC-backed UK companies. And he's just about to start his PhD at the University of Bristol on cybersecurity doctoral training program in September. So, Andrew, as I say, you're really, really welcome. And thank you so much again for giving us your time. So I'll hand over to you if I may.
Oh, thank you, Ross. I appreciate that. As I say, morning, everybody. My name is Andy Baldrian. And as Ross says, I've spent the best part of 30 years as a VP of engineering. More recently did a master's in cybersecurity, and for my sins I'm heading off to do a PhD. So this morning we're going to just have a chat about VPNs and really ask the question, you know, why do I need one? So let's start off straight away. So first, let me just get that running. Right. So first of all, I always kind of start these with there's normally great information around on the web, and two good sites are the National Cybersecurity Center and the US equivalent, so that is NIST. Both of those actually have really good explanations of what VPNs are, how you might use them, and their benefits. And if you have the time, I would definitely suggest that you go and take a look at those. However, they are more aimed at, say, corporate uses of VPNs than individuals, and individuals that are considering issues around privacy. What we have seen, however, is this increase in service providers who are offering individuals the use of a VPN. And I've put a few of the logos up there, but you may well recognize a number of those. And that's the bit we're really going to focus on. We're going to focus on what are these and what do they do for you, and more importantly, what they don't do for you. And one little interesting fact that I spotted while I was doing a little bit of background research, actually, probably almost half of you have already used a VPN at some time while you're on the internet. So the chances are you already know quite a lot about this, I'm hoping. But I was surprised at that figure. I thought it was quite a lot higher than I expected. So let's ask the question first. What the heck is a VPN, right? So let's take a scenario, a completely imaginary scenario that for some strange reason, we all have to work from home. I'm not entirely sure how we'd ever get there, but let's pretend. So you now have got this issue, which is you've got your lovely laptop, but you need to connect it to your office network. And how are you going to do that? Well, okay, simplest thing is I get a very long bit of cable and I plug one end into my computer and I plug the other end into the office network. And what I've got is a private network, okay? And nobody can see my traffic, which is great. and I can work from home. And the only issue is that I've now got to put a really long cable in, which not only is going to be expensive, but almost certainly probably won't work due to signal loss and resistance, etc. Right? So while it's a great idea, it's somewhat impractical. So I'm not going to do that, right? But then you think to yourself, well, look, there's this magic internet-y thing, and why don't I just plug my computer into the internet, plug my office into the internet, and it's all going to be fabulous, right? And the answer is, well, yes, that's exactly, you can do that. But there are a couple of things to consider. So when the internet was first established, security was not really its main concern. So actually, the traffic that's going between your home and your office is visible to anybody who wishes to take a look at it, right? And unless you're using a service such as HTTPS or SSL, i.e. an encrypted service, then actually all of that traffic is free to be seen. And so clearly, if you were working on something sensitive at home, you wouldn't want somebody to see all of that traffic. So that's one issue you'd be potentially concerned about. The other issue is your home computer isn't really on your office network. All you've done is you've kind of opened the door via your router to allowing access to your home computer. And the issue there is allowing you to get in through the door, if you like, probably, if you're not very careful, is going to let somebody else get in. And so again, probably that's not the most secure option we could have gone for. So in steps the wonderful world of VPNs. Okay, so how does a VPN work? Well, firstly, its job is to really connect your home computer with the office network. And the way it does that is that it has two pieces of software. So on your home computer, it has something called a VPN client. So that's pictured by that little lock symbol. And what that VPN client does, it kind of fools your computer into thinking there's an extra link. And it's an extra link that goes directly to your office. And when your computer wants to use that link to send packets, what the client does is it encrypts those packets and it sends them to his friend over in your office. And on the other side is this thing called the VPN server. And the VPN server depicted by the unlock symbol. What it's going to do is it gets that packet from the VPN client and it decrypts it and it throws it onto the network. Okay, so why? What's the result of that? What it effectively does is magically teleports you, or rather your computer, onto the office network. So to anybody on the office network or anywhere else, your computer is sitting on the office network and they can send packets to your computer to that IP address and you can respond and basically nobody can tell the difference. The reality is, of course, you're actually sitting at home and your traffic is being encrypted by your client and then decrypted by the server. And fundamentally, that's it. There's nothing more special about a VPN. But the question is, well, okay, if that's what a VPN's for, why do we want one? So we have to think about some of the issues, privacy issues, and then ask the question, how can a VPN help? So let's take a look at some of these, an example, okay? Imagine that I am sitting at home and all I'm going to do is go to the BBC website. All right, I want to see what the news is. So what happens when I do that? So my browser on my computer sends a request through the internet to a web server, in this case on the BBC, and the BBC web server sends back the page with all those lovely pictures, right? Which is great. Now let's look at what can happen, right? So depending on where you are, your internet service provider it definitely is possible. Whether they do it is a different matter, but it's definitely possible for your internet service provider to see all of your traffic, right? So that's whether that's BT or Vodafone or PlusNet, whatever. All that traffic has to go through your service provider. And as a reminder, if you're sat in let's say a coffee shop connected to a Wi-Fi router, then actually all of that traffic is also going through that Wi-Fi router. And again, unless you're using an encrypted service, all of that traffic is in plain text. Depending on where you live in the world and various other issues, well, first of all your traffic is going to get routed through the internet. But in certain locations, some websites are blocked. So it may not actually be possible in certain regions or certain areas to, for example, get to the BBC News or some other website. So you don't get access to particular websites or particular content. When we then look at the web server itself, one of the other things that web server gets, as well as your request to say, hey, I'd like to see what's on the news, it also gets your IP address. And there are services that allow you to convert your IP address into a location. So in fact, the website knows exactly where you are as well. Okay, and you may have seen some websites when you go to them will pop up saying you're in wherever it might be, and that can be somewhat disconcerting sometimes. So if you are in a situation where actually some of those privacy issues are concerning for you, you might step back and say, well, how could a VPN help me either hide my location or give me access to content that, for whatever reason, I wish people not to see. So here's the example of how a VPN can help. So let's imagine for a minute that I have signed up to a VPN provider. And for this example, I have signed up to one in the US. And now we'll see the way. Let's look at first, how does it work? So again, I want to go to BBC News. And what's going to happen is, first, my VPN client is going to encrypt my request. It's going to send it to the US to a VPN server sitting in the service provider's data center, so in the middle. That is then going to decrypt that request, send it to, in this case, the BBC, and the BBC website is then going to send back the page to the server, the VPN server. The VPN server is then going to encrypt it and send it to me. All right. Then that's the flow. So from my perspective, it looks completely normal because I'm just browsing the web. But there are a few things that are different, right? So first of all, anybody trying to look at my traffic, whether that was because it was my service provider or somebody else, or I was on a website, a Wi-Fi. They can't. All they're going to see is encrypted traffic that's all going to my VPN server. So if they want to stop certain traffic, like stop access to the BBC, it's very difficult because they don't know where I'm going. So they either have to stop all of the traffic or they have to let it all go. And so really what I'm doing on the internet in terms of browsing is completely hidden from anybody. And then when we go and we look at the website will get an IP address, but it doesn't get my IP address. It gets the IP address of the server that is being used in my VPN service provider. So in this case, it gets an IP address, which is located in the US. So it looks, as far as the website's concerned, as if I'm in the US. And so effectively, I've hidden what I'm doing and I've hidden my location completely, right? And I mean, VPNs can and sometimes are used to effectively access services outside of the country that you're in. Now, normally when you do this, it is highly likely that you're going to come a cropper on the terms and conditions of the provider. So if you were to try and do anything like that, you definitely need to check with the provider first. Not something that I would recommend. But this at least is effectively hiding your location and hiding your traffic. So if you decide, hey, great, I'm going to have one of these VPNs, then how do I get one to work, right? What do I need to do? And the answer is actually it's really quite easy. So when you sign up for a VPN, so the examples from the first page, most of them will give you a VPN client. And you simply install that VPN client, download it, install it. They're normally one-click installs, very easy, and you're done. Now, in fact, most operating systems today, so Windows, Mac, etc., all already have a VPN client built into the operating system. And you can also just configure your PC just to use use your VPN. So you don't even need the client. And often, particularly when you're using a corporate VPN, what you might do is configure your router to actually be the VPN client. And then effectively anybody that connects to that router automatically uses your VPN, and all the traffic from your router is encrypted and sent to your VPN server, which is clearly quite a good idea. One thing to note, VPNs can be slow. Now, why is that? Well, really, if you think about it, all your traffic is now first getting encrypted, it's being sent to a server, that server's then decrypting it and sending it on, it's coming back, and the server's then encrypting it and sending it to your client, and your client has to decrypt it. That's extra work for your client. So if you've got an old machine, you might find the VPN slow. And also, depending on the service provider, you want to make sure that there's enough servers and they're big enough servers to deal with the level of traffic. Otherwise, you might find it slow. And the other thing that's kind of very important is you really do want to be using the VPN client on your mobile device. So if you've got a VPN and you use it at home, that's brilliant. But when you're out traveling, you want to be able to use it. So having a VPN client on something like your phone or your laptop is really helpful, because it helps you in those situations where potentially you're connecting to an open Wi-Fi and you've no idea who is running that. Okay, so installing one of these things is very easy. So this is probably, I think, actually the most important slide. So it's also, okay, so understanding what a VPN can do for you is great, but actually understanding what the VPN is not doing is equally important. When you when you buy a VPN service from these various providers, they will also tell you that they do a lot of extra things. And it's kind of like a washing machine that's saying, yeah, well, I'm also, not only am I a washing machine, but I'm also a dryer, or I've got some fancy piece of technology to do extra anti-wrinkling or something of this nature. It's additional to, in this case, VPN. All right, so let's look at that in a little bit more detail. So obviously, a VPN hides from your ISP any, if you like, internet activity. If I'm looking at your router and the signals coming out from your router, I can't see what you're doing other than that you're talking to a VPN. That's all I can see. But you should remember that the VPN server can see all of your traffic. Okay. And so what you've done is you've effectively moved the trust relationship from your ISP to the VPN server or service provider. And most VPN service providers will log activity. You know, there are some that will advertise that they don't, but normally there will be logs. And again, because if you've chosen a VPN service provider in a different country, then the rules and regulations covering the use of computers are now that country's rules and regulations. So depending on where you are, that may or may not be a good thing, but it's definitely something to be aware of. The other thing we should look at is tracking cookies. Now, I'm not going to go into tracking cookies. I don't have anywhere near enough time, but they are things that a website can ask your browser to store, and it helps the website kind of make your experience on the web better. All right, or I would say keep an eye on you and understand that you're coming back to the site. Now, a VPN doesn't stop any of that happening. Think about it. Your browser is going to make a request, including a cookie. That request will get encrypted, sent to the server, decrypted, including the cookie, and passed on. So it won't stop any tracking cookies at all. But you'll see that many of the service providers will say, "Oh yes, we deal with, you know, we remove cookies and we stop tracking cookies, etc." This is normally done by additional software, not by the VPN itself, but by extra software that's included as part of the VPN client. And what they're going to try and do is take those cookies out, which in some cases can be a good thing. In other cases, it will mean that websites are unable to provide certain sets of features, and you'll need to make some decisions about whether that's something you want or not. But fundamentally, they don't stop you being tracked via cookies. The other thing to think about is VPNs don't hide your search history, right? If you go on to a search platform, and there are many around, and you start doing internet searches, the search provider can still remember all of those different searches and can still potentially associate that with you as a user, depending on whether you've logged in or something of that nature, or by using other things such as device fingerprinting, etc. All the VPN does is hide the traffic between those 2 points, and it's not going to hide what you're searching online. So again, there are additional pieces of software that can help with that, that some of the service providers, the VPN service providers give you. When looking for, you know, who should I go with? So you'll know I'm not going to recommend a particular VPN provider. There are a number out there. many of the top ones are absolutely brilliant, and I'll let you read your own what's the reviews, etc. But there are a few things to think about, right? So the first one and most important one is location, right? So if you choose a VPN in Los Angeles, then your traffic from your home is going to go all the way across the internet to Los Angeles, get decrypted, and then go to wherever you're going. So if you're browsing the BBC website, that means your traffic is then coming all the way back. May be slow, may not be, but you need to think about the location. And as I've said already, the legal requirements for that location. And the other thing you need to think about is performance. Just, is this a big enough company that's going to have the services, the servers needed to make that performance work? And finally, so should you use a VPN? So I would argue that if you have a business and you want to connect a machine at home to your business, to your corporate office, then definitely a VPN is a good move. That's what they were designed for. If you have any privacy concerns at all, then you may want to start using a VPN. If you're using sensitive information at home, whatever, I think they're a very good idea. If you're traveling, a VPN, I think, is absolutely brilliant. And for me, that's the one time where I absolutely would always use a VPN. And then the final word from me, so the thing I would say is VPNs will actually not keep you safe on the internet, but they are a good step in the right direction. And I would say having a VPN is a good thing. So that's me finished. I always say, never believe anything I say. Always take a look at my where I've got this from. Read it all for yourself, and hopefully what I've said is correct. And with that, I think I'm done, and it's time for questions if there are any.
Yeah, Andrew, that was fascinating. Thank you so much. And yes, there are. Your topics given us quite a few questions. Can I just say now, if we do run out of time, and we've only got a couple of minutes left, I'll endeavour to get answers to each and every one of you, because obviously I'll download the chat. So first question then is from Alice. So when you say traffic is in plain text, do you just mean what we're visiting, or would a Google Sheet or Google document content be accessible?
Great, good question. So most websites use a system called HTTPS, and you will see that in the little bar at the top. They'll have that nice little padlock and HTTPS. If that is the case, then the content is encrypted. Okay, so in that case, the Google Doc, Google almost certainly will be using HTTPS. I use it myself, and I'm pretty positive it does. And therefore, the content of the document is encrypted. But the fact that you are going to Google, and the fact that you have a document and that URL is not encrypted. And so depending on where you're going and what you're doing, you are leaking information from the URL, but not from the document itself.
That's great. Thanks, Andrew. Mark Moore, I'm afraid we're going to have to skip you, but I'm sure you won't mind too much. Next question then, I think we've just about got time, is from Julie. And she's asking, so is the VPN designed to be used for privacy or security, or both?
That is an excellent question. I think if you look at the history of them, and I was saying earlier that I had a look at this, quite interesting, is very much to try and do make the link secure. So I think security is the first thing. It helps with privacy, most definitely, but it's not a it's not the golden solution, if that makes sense. You need to do a lot of other things to make sure that you are actually you know, to give you real privacy online. This is a step in the right direction.
Great, Andrew. I think we're pretty much out of time. As I say, I think there's another couple of questions asking about which VPNs you would prefer, but I think you probably answered that question already. It is a question of people going out and carrying out their own research. So if we can conclude there, a huge thank you, Andrew. So grateful for your time, and that was a fascinating presentation. We'll be publishing the webinar on our YouTube channel for any colleagues who you think may be interested in this morning's webinar and couldn't make it. And we'll also send you a link to this as well as a copy of the slides. So as I say, huge thank you to Andrew, and I'm sure you'll be coming back with us again. I do hope so. And it just remains to say to you all, please stay safe online. Thank you.
Cheers. Thank you.